Well, hello everybody. I hope you're doing well and having a great start to your week. No podcast this week, but in place of that, I have a brief invitation to you. In fact, two invitations to you, which I wanted to share with you. I've mentioned by email and on the men's group chat. I'll also ask one of the ladies to pop it out on the ladies group chat. So that by the time you get this video, if you're watching this, you should already have received one or more of those communications. But I wanted just to say a little bit more about them both right here. So the first concerns midweek this week, when Pastor Shaw and I are going to be sitting down to have a conversation together to draw together some of the threads from the previous 2 weeks and to address some questions that we're going to be inviting you to put to us. And it's concerning those questions that I want to solicit your input at this point. Just to remind you, 2 weeks ago on Wednesday night, midweek, we had a session on worship and cultural transformation. And then just last week, we had a session on the family and cultural transformation. So you remember, if you were there or if you were listening in, Psalm 67 describes in outline how the transformation of the world and the ingathering of the nations to the Lord presupposes faithful worship in the sanctuary. And then I spent most of our time exploring and developing Jim Jordan's very, very helpful way of thinking about the three zones or spheres of human life. Worship, so to speak, in the sanctuary, where our primary relationship is with the triune God. The land, the zone of relationships within the covenant community. And then the world, garden, sanctuary, land, world, where our relationship is with those who don't know Christ. And I said and showed you many biblical texts that pointed towards that central idea that it's as we renew our relationship with God in the sanctuary and worship, that our relationships within our community as brothers and sisters in Christ are renewed and transformed. And then we're in a position to reach out to the world and see in our various areas of our life the culture in which we live transformed and renewed in the image of Christ. And then secondly, last week we had Psalm 127 and 128, which focuses on the other dimension, so to speak, of how we as individuals, or really more properly, we as families, seek to cut with the grain of God's purposes in history in order to see the world transformed. And it is, of course, through Christian families. That's not to exclude, of course, the place of people who aren't married or aren't yet married. I think I said quite a little bit about that at the start of the session. But it is to say that God works not only through space, worship, community, world, but down through time, through many generations. God's plan to restore and renew the world in Christ and to see the gospel spread across the world and to transform social institutions rests on his commitment to be faithful to his people and to his people's children and his children's children, to be God to them as well as to us. And so what that means is how we worship God and how we seek to live as Christian families, both of which are extremely important aspects of our life as a church, and they're really central to our piety and the way of life here as a community. How we worship God, how we seek to live in Christian families, those are two critical biblical keys to the third driving conviction that those talks were related to, how we seek to see the world transformed. So if you think of it in those three ways, worshipping God, God's faithfulness to his covenant people in their families down through the generations, and the transformation of the world. Well, those are pretty major themes. I think you probably picked that up already, and I know that you share these convictions as well as members at All Saints. So what I'd love to encourage you to do is this. If you have any questions about any aspect of those, if you've been tuning over since you were at midweek, or if you wanted to listen again to one or both of those talks, they're both online, allsaintskirk.com/media, and just scroll down till you get to the section on the Psalms, and the link will be in the emails. I'd love to hear your questions. In advance is great. On the evening is fine also. And Pastor Shaw and I will try and get as practical as we can and just try and address some of the responses to those questions, because I really do want to highlight how central this is to our life as a church. And it is worth spending a good amount of time trying to get as clear a picture as we possibly can of how our worship and our lives as covenant families ought to be ordered in such a way that we can anticipate seeing God's faithfulness in transforming the world. So that's the first thing that I wanted to lay before you. The second is this. This is Herman Bavinck's monumental and wonderful book, The Wonderful Works of God. Herman Bavinck was a Dutch Reformed theologian at the end of the 19th and early 20th century. He wrote some of the big fat volumes on my shelf over there. He wrote a 4-volume Reformed Dogmatics, which is about this thick. And he also wrote various other tomes on Christian ethics and so on. But his book, The Wonderful Works of God, is not a paraphrase or a kind of a condensed version of his longer works. It's an entirely fresh and independent work, in a sense, that has its own kind of literary and theological integrity, but it draws on the immense theological understanding and erudition and clarity that he displayed in his more technical works, and presents it in a way which is far easier to wrestle with. It's shorter. I mean, I say it's shorter. It's 2 inches thick, an inch and a half thick. It runs to over 600 pages, but it lacks some of the technical apparatus and some of the matters of detail which occupy him in those longer works. Now, why am I mentioning this to you? Well, it's because I'd like to encourage you to consider reading it with me over the next year or so. I thought of trying to put this out there at the beginning of January, but decided against it, partly for practical reasons and partly because I don't think there's anything particularly that ought to occupy us or preoccupy us about the beginning of January. I know it's a time for New Year's resolutions and so on, but I want to encourage you to read it along with me and to make progress with it over the course of a year or so. And I anticipate that this may bring with it a whole bunch of different intertwined benefits. The first is that we will be seeing the richness of our Reformed faith systematically and carefully spelled out by one of its most theologically able and pastorally wise exponents. Herman Bavinck really is a giant of our Reformed tradition. He's up there alongside all the people whom you've heard of, Luther and Calvin, and not many others, as a master of the literature and of the theological substance of our Christian heritage. And he's a great communicator. The book is not easy to read in the sense of being a kind of simple softback, 120-page thing, but neither is it really difficult. It's the sort of book that if you were to take 15, 30 minutes, maybe an hour or an hour and a half, once or twice a week, you could make great progress through and would enrich your understanding of our faith and of the scriptures truly wonderfully. And what I plan to do is to get together a bunch of people who say, yeah, I want to have a crack at doing this. And then we'll meet perhaps periodically over the year, and how we meet will depend on how many people want to do it. If there's half a dozen people, we'll probably meet in my front room and just kind of hang out and have a drink and just talk about it. If there's a larger group of people, we might try and structure the conversations in some other way. And I think it may help as well, particularly in a context where for a lot of people, their theological diet consists of fragments of online material of various kinds. And this isn't to, let's not retrace the steps of all those conversations that we've had in the past about that kind of online content. There are some strengths to it, but as I think I think, and many of you I'm sure agree with me, that there are some weaknesses to that. One of the problems is it doesn't really provide a sustained context for receiving deep, rich, well-rounded and comprehensive teaching across the whole of our Christian faith. I'm not sure where you'd go online to find something like that. In order to find that, you really need to find a book. And this is a really, really great book. Of course, if you were to read this, it might be that you found yourself having a bit less time to read some of the more fragmented and ephemeral content that's online. And I think you might find that maybe challenging to start with if that's where you spend a lot of your time. But I think for those of you who do spend a bit of time in those online contexts and thought, you know what, I want to spend 2024 reading something that's 100 and something years old, and seeing if that doesn't do me more good, I think you might find that this really does. So here's what I have in mind. If you're interested in doing that, reading this book along with me, then please give me a shout, to send me an email. I'll probably see if I can find somebody who's interested in coordinating this group. And so if you'd be interested in doing that, then please go ahead and let me know. And then what we'll do is we'll buy the books. You could buy it online at Amazon, but it turns out that I've found a way to get a special offer. It's normally about $45, but you can get it for 20 something if we go to the right place, and we might even be able to get a further reduction if we make a bulk purchase. I'm not sure, but so don't go ahead and buy it just yet. Just send me an email, let me know if you're interested, and I'll add your name to the list. And then perhaps we'll meet 2, 3, 4 times during the year just to talk about some of the contents here. I think what this might also do, and here's just a final point, I want to try to develop contexts for theological conversation among us as a congregation. And I know that these sort of things happen all the time in your homes and socially and so on and so forth. There are some very, very good things that can be learned from one another in the right kind of context for theological conversation. There are many, many situations and many media which don't lend themselves well to nuanced and thoughtful theological discussion. But sitting down with a group of people for a couple of hours, having read a portion of a really good book together, is about the best context for a really rich and illuminating and insightful and prayer-soaked and theologically and pastorally encouraging conversation that I can think of. So I want to encourage you, if you're interested in doing that, this is The Wonderful Works of God by Herman Bavinck. You can Google it and find reviews about telling you how great it is. Like I said, don't go ahead and buy it unless you really want to spend a ton of money on it. And I'll be able to, once I get your names together, if you're interested, we can look into making a bulk purchase, save a few dollars, and then maybe get started in the next couple of weeks or so. And we'll set up some kind of structure of how we try and tackle this week by week. So I hope those two things are of interest to you. Send us some questions about the topics from the last 2 midweeks, and Pastor Shaw and I will pick those up on Wednesday night, Lord willing. And then secondly, The Wonderful Works of God, one of the best one-volume systematic theologies I've come across in recent years, and certainly something that will do us a lot of good, and I think you'd enjoy if you'd be looking for something to stretch you theologically in the next few months. Hope that's helpful. Look forward to seeing you all soon. The Lord bless you. Bye for now.